The first thing I saw when I pulled through my south pasture gate that Sunday afternoon was a bright blue slide. And for a second my brain honestly couldn't process what I was looking at. I just sat there with my truck idling, one hand on the wheel, staring out across land my family had owned for nearly 70 years, and right there in the middle of it stood a full-blown playground. Monkey bars, swings, rubber mulch, benches, even one of those cheerful little signs planted in concrete like somebody expected a ribbon-cutting ceremony. It read Cedar Ridge Family Play Area, open daily, and I remember laughing under my breath because sometimes when something's so ridiculous, anger doesn't hit first, disbelief does. My name's Travis Bennett. I'm 48, born outside Lubbock, Texas, and I run Bennett Creek Ranch, 80 acres passed down from my grandfather. My dad used to say if you walk enough fence line, the land starts talking to you. You know where water settles after rain, which mesquite leans hardest in the wind, where calves like to gather when the sun drops low. You notice everything, which is why seeing half an acre of my pasture flattened and turned into a neighborhood playground felt like getting punched in the chest. The Cedar Ridge subdivision sat right along my southern fence line. Nice neighborhood. Families. Clean lawns. Kids riding bikes. We'd always gotten along. Sometimes children would stop and watch the calves. Once in a while, if parents asked, I'd let them come near the barn and feed carrots to the goats. We were neighbors. That was all. Apparently somebody on their HOA board decided neighbor men available. I parked and walked straight out there. Fresh mulch. Brand new concrete. Metal supports bolted down. And the part that made my stomach tighten, the orange survey marker was still standing 10 feet away. Bright and obvious. My property line clearly marked like it had been for years. I crouched beside it and just stared. No easement. No public access. No confusion. That ground belonged to me. A voice behind me said, "Glad you made it back." I turned. A woman in workout clothes and sunglasses stood near the fence with her arms crossed like she was expecting approval. I'm Melissa Grant, HOA board secretary. I looked at her, then looked back at the playground, then back at her. You built this. She smiled. The community needed more space for children, and this section was open. My pasture was open. She shrugged. Well, it wasn't being used. That sentence hit harder than I expected. I pointed toward the survey stake. That marker says different. Melissa barely glanced at it. We voted as a board. That's great. I looked around. Did the board also buy the land? Her smile disappeared. There's no need to be hostile. No, ma'am. Hostile is what cows get when they step on playground hardware. She inhaled slowly. We believe this was shared green space. I laughed once. Belief doesn't change county records. For a second, she looked annoyed. Then she gave me this tight little smile and said, "Let's discuss it tomorrow when everyone's calmer." And she walked away. That part stuck with me. Not panic. Not apology. Just confidence. Like she genuinely believed they could build first and sort ownership out later. That evening my cousin Dean came by the barn. Dean's the kind of man who can repair a fence, roast a brisket, and deliver terrible ideas with a perfectly straight face. I told him everything. He listened, looked toward the south pasture, then toward my Berkshire hog pen. 6 big muddy pigs shifting around near the feed trough. Dean took a sip of iced tea. You know, that tone alone made me nervous. Those pigs are curious. I looked at him. He shrugged. Seems a shame not to let livestock inspect all those new amenities. I sat there for a second. Then I laughed. And once the idea got in my head, it stayed there. By 10 o'clock the moon was bright, and the neighborhood lights glowed across the fence. I walked to the hog pen. 6 Berkshire boars looked up immediately. Big shoulders. Mud-caked sides. Zero respect for plastic. Well, boys, I muttered, opening the trailer. Y'all got somewhere to be. They loaded fast. By the time I drove down toward the playground, I had one brief thought that maybe this was too much. Maybe I should wait. Call a lawyer Monday morning. Handle it clean. Then the headlights hit that bright plastic slide standing right in the middle of my pasture like it had every right in the world to be there. And that thought disappeared. I dropped the gate. Tank the biggest hog charged out first. Straight into the mulch. Wood chips flew everywhere. Another pig rammed a bench. A third shoved his snout under the slide and lifted one side clean off the ground. Within 30 seconds chaos had fully arrived. One scratched his back against the swing frame until chains rattled. Another dug through the sandbox like he was hunting treasure. Tank somehow got hold of a bright red toddler swing and trotted off with it like a prize. I leaned against the fence under the moon and watched 6 muddy pigs absolutely destroy what the HOA had proudly finished 48 hours earlier. Then porch lights started coming on across Cedar Ridge. One house, then another, then another. A woman screamed. A dog started barking. And Melissa Grant came sprinting across the grass in slippers and a hoodie, flashlight bouncing everywhere. Mr. Bennett. I tipped my hat. Evening. Get those pigs out of here. I looked around. Out of where? She stopped cold. Then Tank slammed into the climbing bars hard enough to shake the whole frame. Melissa gasped. They're destroying everything. I folded my arms. They're on ranch land. A loud crack echoed through the dark. The playground sign snapped sideways and dropped face first into the mud, and standing there under moonlight. With 6 hogs turning Cedar Ridge family play area into a total disaster. I had a feeling the HOA was finally about to understand exactly where their property line ended. Melissa stood there frozen for half a second while the flashlight shook in her hand. Tank had the red toddler swing hanging out of his mouth like he'd just won a prize at the county fair. Another hog was tearing through the mulch border, and one of the smaller boars had discovered that plastic slide supports made a surprisingly satisfying scratching post. Mr. Bennett. Her voice cracked this time. Do something. I kept my arms folded. They are doing something. She stared at me like she couldn't believe I'd said that. Across the subdivision, more porch lights flicked on. Front doors opened. A couple dogs were barking like the world was ending. One guy stepped onto his driveway in pajama pants and just yelled, "Why is there livestock in the park?" That got me. I laughed before I could stop myself. Melissa didn't. Call animal control, she shouted to somebody behind her. I looked over. Animal control? For pigs on ranch land. She ignored me and kept pacing while Tank shoved his shoulder into the climbing bars hard enough to tilt the whole frame sideways. The chains rattled, mulch sprayed everywhere, and a bench slid halfway into the grass. By sunrise, there wasn't much left of the HOA's perfect little project. The turf was peeled back in sections. Mulch scattered across the pasture. The sandbox looked excavated. One bench somehow ended up tipped near the dry creek bed. And my pigs. Well, they looked extremely pleased with themselves. At 6:15 my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Mr. Bennett. This is David Palmer with Palmer and Reed Legal representing Cedar Ridge Estates. He sounded polished. Careful. Like every sentence had a bill attached. You are being notified regarding extensive damages caused by your livestock. I leaned against the barn. Interesting. The HOA intends to seek compensation. I looked toward the pasture. Counselor. When exactly did HOA property get built on my ranch? Silence. Then papers moving. I kept talking. I've got survey records, county plats, and security footage from Friday morning showing contractor trucks. He cleared his throat. We may need to review that. Sounds like a plan. And he hung up. I spent the next hour making calls. County zoning. Sheriff's office. Then local Channel 6. A reporter named Emily Carter had covered ranch stories before and knew the area well. When she pulled up outside my gate around 9 with a cameraman and coffee in hand, she took one look at the playground wreckage and stopped dead. Oh wow. That about sums it up. I walked her out there. Showed her the survey marker. Showed her the county parcel map. Then pulled security footage from the barn camera. Friday morning. Contractor trucks rolling through Cedar Ridge. Workers unloading equipment. Concrete being poured. Clear as day. No permit. No notice. No call. Emily looked at the footage. Then toward Melissa standing near the fence trying not to look panicked. Then back at me. So they really built all this assuming nobody would stop them. Looks that way. She smiled that reporter smile. The one that says tonight's story just got very interesting. Deputy Nolan Ramirez arrived 20 minutes later. Good guy. He'd helped me with a loose steer once. He walked the line himself. Checked the survey stake. Looked at county records. Then Melissa came marching over with 2 HOA board members. One of them was Grant Holloway, HOA president. Tall guy, expensive sunglasses, pressed polo shirt like he'd walked off a golf course. Melissa spoke first. This is vandalism. Ramirez looked at her. Whose property was construction built on? Our neighborhood greenbelt. Ramirez pointed to the marker. No ma'am. This belongs to Mr. Bennett. Grant stepped forward. There was a misunderstanding. Did you get permission? No. Then it wasn't a misunderstanding. Emily absolutely wrote that one down. By noon the footage was on local TV and all over social media. Drone shots. County maps. My pasture. A pig dragging a broken playground panel in the background. Comments exploded. Half the county thought it was hilarious. The other half wanted to know how an HOA approved a project without checking ownership first. Then Cedar Ridge residents started commenting. That mattered, because a lot of them clearly had no idea what happened. Some were angry, some embarrassed, some asking why they'd paid HOA fees for land the neighborhood didn't even own. And suddenly this wasn't Travis versus a neighborhood anymore. It was Travis versus an HOA board that had gotten way too comfortable making decisions. Around 4:30 Grant Holloway came to my gate, clipboard in hand, trying hard to stay calm. Mr. Bennett. Grant. We need to resolve this. Sure. He looked toward the destroyed playground. The board believed this pasture edge was community access space. I pointed at the orange survey stake. That marker was here the whole time. He adjusted his grip. We assumed, there's that word again. His jaw tightened. The neighborhood already invested in this. And you invested on land you don't own. He looked around, took a breath. What do you want? I pointed toward the pasture. Everything removed. He nodded. Concrete dugout. Another nod. Fresh soil. New grass. Fence reinforced at HOA expense. He scribbled all of it, then looked toward Tank. My biggest hog was scratching against the monkey bars hard enough to make them creak. And the pigs. I shrugged. They seem attached. He stared. I stayed serious. Then he rubbed his forehead. Travis, this got out of hand. I stepped closer. My grandfather fenced this property himself. My dad worked this pasture 30 years. You bulldozed it in 2 days. That landed. He didn't answer. Tank picked that exact second to yank loose a bright plastic panel and drag it across the dirt. One contractor nearby snorted, trying not to laugh. Grant closed his clipboard. Emergency HOA meeting tonight. Take your time. He turned to leave. Stopped. Then looked back. You really let pigs loose on purpose? I tipped my hat. I let livestock enjoy community improvements. For the first time all day, he almost smiled. Then he walked off. That evening, the Cedar Ridge clubhouse filled with homeowners. I didn't go. Didn't need to. By then, county records were public. News coverage was everywhere. And folks were angry. Around sunset, Dean came by with barbecue and sweet tea. We sat on the barn porch watching the pasture while the hogs rooted around near the busted slide. Then my phone buzzed. Grant. I answered. Long pause. Then he said, the board voted. I waited. We'll remove everything tomorrow morning. Full restoration. HOA pays. I looked out across the grass. At the broken sign. At Tank nudging the sandbox. Good. Then Grant hesitated. One more thing. What's that? Your pig dragged one of our benches into the creek bed, and nobody can get near him. I leaned back and smiled. Yeah. Tank had always been territorial. And just before sunrise the next morning, contractor trucks started lining up outside Cedar Ridge, headed straight for my fence. By sunrise the next morning, contractor trucks were already lined up outside Cedar Ridge and rolling toward my fence one by one. Same crew that had built the playground, now back to take every last piece of it apart. I stood there with a mug of coffee while the engines idled and 6 Berkshire hogs watched like unpaid supervisors. Nobody was talking much. No smiles. Just metal clanging and workers moving fast. Tank noticed immediately. He lifted his head, gave one low grunt, and walked straight toward the monkey bars like he was making sure nobody missed a spot. One contractor looked over at me and said, Sir, your pig's following me. I took a sip. He likes accountability. That got a nervous laugh. By mid-morning, residents from Cedar Ridge started gathering near the fence. Families, retirees, kids on bikes. Some embarrassed. Some frustrated. A few looked genuinely mad. An older woman stepped forward first. Mr. Bennett? Yes, ma'am. I'm Carol Jenkins. We live on Oak Ridge Lane. I nodded. She looked uncomfortable. I wanted to apologize. Most of us had no clue the board approved construction on your land. I figured. A younger guy behind her shook his head. They told us it was neighborhood green space. Another added. And we all paid HOA fees for it. That changed everything. Because now this wasn't me against the neighborhood. It was a neighborhood realizing their own board had crossed a line. Melissa stood near the sidewalk with her arms folded tight. Grant looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Around lunchtime, Emily Carter came back with the Channel 6 crew. She filmed the teardown, then walked over smiling. Well, looks like the pigs won. Temporary victory. She laughed, then asked while the camera rolled, "Did you ever think about handling this through lawyers instead?" I looked toward the pasture. Fresh dirt, broken plastic piled in a trailer, Tank chewing a loose strip of turf. Then I looked back at her. Lawyers matter, but sometimes folks don't listen until consequences show up muddy. Emily nearly lost it laughing. That clip aired that night. By afternoon, the playground was gone. Every bolt, every beam, every bench. The crew dug out concrete anchors and hauled off the debris. Then trucks brought fresh topsoil, seed, native wildflowers, fence materials. The HOA paid for all of it. Grant signed every invoice. Didn't argue once. As the sun started dropping, he walked over. No sunglasses. No clipboard. Just tired. "I owe you an apology." I stayed quiet. He nodded and looked out at the pasture. I pushed the project. Melissa brought the idea up, and I convinced myself it wouldn't matter. "No," I said. "You convinced yourself nobody would say no." That one sat there. Wind moved through the grass. A calf wandered near the far fence. Grant exhaled. Then he finally said something honest. I looked at that open pasture and figured it wasn't hurting anybody. It just looked empty. And there it was. The whole thing. Not revenge. Not some personal grudge. Just convenience. Entitlement. That dangerous habit people get when something looks quiet enough to take. I looked out at the pasture and thought about my grandfather setting fence posts by hand, my dad patching wire in summer heat. Years and years of work tied into land that looks simple from a distance. Then I told him, quiet doesn't mean available. Grant nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't defend himself. Just turned and walked back toward Cedar Ridge. And that should have been the end of it. Mostly it was. A couple weeks later, fresh grass had started coming back. Wildflowers pushed through. The pasture looked like itself again. I added one sign by the fence. Private property, active livestock area, then underneath. Unauthorized playground construction strongly discouraged. Dean laughed so hard when he saw it, he nearly dropped his tea. Even Emily came back to film that. Cedar Ridge calmed down after a while. Melissa resigned from the HOA. Grant stayed, but got a whole lot quieter. And a few neighbors actually became friendlier than before. Carol brought her grandson over one Saturday to feed carrots to the goats. Nice kid. Good manners. No hard feelings. Fence respected. But every now and then somebody asks about that oddly specific ranch sign. And somebody always tells the story. About the HOA. About the playground. About 6 muddy Berkshire hogs. Depending who tells it, I'm either the stubborn rancher who took things too far, or the guy who reminded everybody that property lines still matter. Maybe it's both. But I can tell you this. Nobody in Cedar Ridge has confused my pasture for neighborhood space ever again. And Tank. He still gets real interested anytime he sees bright-colored plastic. Now I want to hear what you think. Did I go too far letting the pigs loose? Or was that exactly what the HOA needed to understand boundaries? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I've heard both sides plenty of times. And I've got a feeling this one's going to split people right down the middle.